good time for us also to see such excitement in our students. So learning is a non-stop process, and when we are learning about today's upcoming trends and what's the future holding for us, that is also a very great thing. Now, I would like to invite, with very immense pleasure, our Director Academics, Ms. Monica Agarwal, who has driven key advancement in curriculum design and learning effectiveness and plays a vital role in our institution's academic success. She will enlighten us about the session and introduce our guest for today. Monica, ma'am, please.
Thank you, Professor Neha. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the session today. Today's session on navigating the artificial intelligence technology transition, it aims to bring to light various aspects associated with this topic, thereby stimulating new ideas and inspiring fresh perspectives. While AI is transforming many aspects of the society and can be termed as the greatest technology-driven change of all times, there are questions around how it might impact jobs, restrict opportunities, and lead to changes in education and the skills that graduating students will need to succeed. Now, in order to ensure that AI-driven future is better, it is more promising, we need new approaches to navigate the AI technology transition. Now, this session will explore how significant a transition this might be, the challenges and opportunities it presents, and ways of successfully navigating it. And to take us through all of this, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Professor Andrew Maynard, who is a professor of advanced technology transitions at Arizona State University in the US. His work is focused on exploring ways of ensuring that the benefits of transformative technologies like AI far outweigh the potential risks. He has authored books like Films from the Future, The Technology and Morality of Sci-Fi Movies, and Future Rising, A Journey from the Past to the Edge of Tomorrow. Professor Maynard also writes regularly for the Substack, The Future of Being Human. Now, without further delay, let's begin our journey into the intriguing world of AI. I am honored to invite Professor Andrew Maynard to share his valuable insights now. Professor Maynard.
Thank you so much, Professor Agarwal. And it's quite wonderful to be here with such a large crowd of students. Even though it's only 7:30 in the morning here in Arizona, this is my absolute pleasure. And thank you very much for coming out of an evening to listen to this. So I should start with a couple of things. First of all, I don't have a good sense of all of your backgrounds or where you're at and where your interests are with artificial intelligence. So I will try not to speak for too long because I think some of the most interesting stuff will come out of the questions, especially if I need to clarify some things or we need to go in different directions. The second thing I want to say is, as you heard in my introduction, I'm a professor of advanced technology transitions. And I should say what that means because this is actually relevant to what I'm going to be talking about. When we talk about technology transitions, we're really talking about how we get from where we are at the moment, the lives we live at the moment, the world we're living in at the moment, to the sort of future we want in the face of incredibly complex and transformative technologies. And the reality is we really don't know how to do this. As you heard, AI as just one technology is one of the most transformative technologies we've come across in a long time. And we just don't have the knowledge and the understanding and the skills to understand how to make sure that an AI future is a good future, which means that we've got to be trying incredibly hard to develop those new skill sets and those new ideas. And this is exactly what I do. So we should come back to artificial intelligence because this is what we're talking about here. And different people have got different perspectives on what's happening with AI at the moment. There are some people who are saying we've been doing artificial intelligence for the last 70 years. There's nothing new here. It's all marketing. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all a mirage that will go away. There are other people that say this is possibly the most important thing that has happened in human history for maybe the last 600 or 700 years, maybe the last 2,000 years. And so that's a very wide range of opinions. And I think most people who work in AI are somewhere in between. But without a doubt, we're seeing something really transformative happening at the moment. And it's opening incredible possibilities, but also incredible challenges. And so the question we have to ask, especially if you're beginning to look at what sort of careers you follow, what sort of jobs you go into, is how do we actually navigate this change, which is of possibly a momentous scale? So, to try and understand this, I want to go back a couple of years. And I suspect that many of you will remember when the company OpenAI, the US company OpenAI, launched their product ChatGPT. This was in November 2022. Before that, most people weren't that aware of artificial intelligence, or if they were, it was probably through movies like The Terminator. People that were working in the field knew that something interesting was happening, but they weren't quite sure where it was going to go. And people really at the very edge of artificial intelligence had been building these very big systems called large language models, but they were largely a research tool until in November 2022, the company OpenAI went public with their tool ChatGPT, which meant anybody could just open a web browser, type in a question, and start talking to an artificial intelligence. And it changed things overnight. There has never been the release of an online package that was adopted so fast and changed things so fast. And the reason it did was people realized as they typed into this little box on the screen that talking with this artificial intelligence was talking with an incredibly intelligent person. It could understand you, it could respond to you like a person, it could pull together knowledge and insights from millions upon millions of resources as if it was the most intelligent person you've ever met. It could do this at a level that was relevant to you, whether you were, say, just in high school or whether you were a university professor. It could do it in different languages. You could suddenly switch languages when you were talking to it and it would respond in your own language. It was quite amazing. People were enamored with it. And it felt like we'd suddenly got to the point where machines were able to behave like humans. Of course, it wasn't quite that simple, but people were so excited that they immediately began to ask, what can we do with this tool? How will it change society? How will it change the opportunities we have? How will it change things for the worse? And if you were in education, one of the first questions was, how will it help students to cheat? And I don't like that word, but a better way of looking at it is how will it help students to take shortcuts to achieve their grades? And so you found after that first release, there was a mad flurry around the world of people asking, what happens if a student who has, say, an essay due just asks artificial intelligence to write it? What if they have an exam and they ask AI for the answers to the questions? And that led both to a lot of thinking about how we can both counter the downsides of this technology, but also how we can utilize it to create better learning environments. So you've seen over the last 18 months a massive change in how people are thinking about education. But it's not just in education. What we've seen over the last 2 years is just massive advances in everything from text interfaces with artificial intelligence, with AI producing art, and the questions around if a machine produces incredible images, is it art or is it not? We've seen AI platforms that can create photorealistic video. We've got games. We've got AI that can code. We've got AI that is now part of decision making in very important systems. I've mentioned we've got AIs that are helping with teaching. You could now get yourself an AI boyfriend or a girlfriend, and that raises a whole range of other questions. And I don't know whether some of you have seen this. Google now has a platform called Notebook LM where you can give it information and knowledge and documents, and it will create an AI podcast for you with two human realistic AIs talking to each other. So realistic. The first time I heard it, I didn't even know that it was artificial intelligence. So this is just how AI is beginning to change the world. And of course, you look at all of these different areas, and there are huge questions around how this is going to impact society. Is it going to take away jobs? Is it going to change the nature of jobs? Is it going to change the skills that you need in order to have a career? Is it somehow going to change the way that democracy works? Is it going to crash society as we know it? Are we heading for an AI apocalypse? So all of these are questions that people are asking, but also it has to be recognized that we are now in a race to build bigger and better AIs. Because when OpenAI launched ChatGPT, they lit an AI fuse. They lit a fuse on this technology, which at some point is going to explode. And the economies that actually had the better AIs are going to be in a better position to actually ensure economic power and economic growth. So now you have a race between economies such as the US and China to build better, more powerful AIs. You have a race between companies to build better AI so that they are the AI dominant company. And above all of this, there's a race to move from where we are at the moment, which is artificial intelligence that simulates humans. It's not really intelligent, but it makes it feel like it's intelligent, to truly intelligent machines. And there is this race towards artificial general intelligence, the idea that you will have an AI that, just like a human, you can train it to do almost anything. So now you're seeing companies both trying to gather market share, but also create a technology that is going to be truly transformative. And as part of this, there's actually a race to create machines that are conscious, that are self-aware. And if you think about that, that is profound, because if we create a machine that has the same level of self-awareness as a human, there are questions around, is it a person? Does it have an identity? Does it have rights? Are we effectively creating life inside a computer? And this is so worrying that you now have some experts saying we should not do this because it raises so many ethical and moral questions. But this is where artificial intelligence is going. And I would just say on that point, there is some uncertainty as to whether we can create machines that are truly conscious. There are many people who say that will never happen. But then there are some experts who will say, what are humans but just a bunch of cells that have incredible compute power, and consciousness is an emergent property of compute. So if we can do it in humans, why can't we do it in machines? And this raises some really interesting questions. But you look at all of this, and this comes back to this idea of technology transitions. And so you can see, as we develop this incredibly powerful technology, artificial intelligence, and different forms of artificial intelligence, it is transforming the world. It is transforming society. It is transforming the way we live our lives, to the extent that the future in a few years' time will be completely different from the past we've been living over the last few decades. And so the question is, how do we transition through this change? How do we navigate this transition? How do we develop the understanding and the knowledge and the insights so that we can actually be part of building an AI future, which is the future we want rather than the future we don't want? And the one thing that's very clear here is we don't actually have an option to stop this. So a little while ago, a couple of years ago, there were a group of scientists who say we ought to pause development of artificial intelligence because it is potentially so dangerous, so disruptive. The reality is, I do not think we can stop progress here. There is something innate in human nature, in our very DNA, that forces us to innovate. We are an incredible biological species that success is down to our ability to problem solve through creative and innovative solutions. And we can't stop doing that, which means that we're always going to be innovating. We're always going to be building new technologies. So the question to me is, when you look at advanced artificial intelligence, not how do we stop it, but how do we steer it in directions which are going to be good for the future of society? And here we both have a challenge and an opportunity. So I'm going to try something really daring and put a slide up. I was going to show you a couple of videos, but I'm not going to do that. But let me just put this slide up here. Hopefully you can see this. So this is something I talk about, which is the problem, innovation, solution, consequence cycle. And I put this on for a very important reason. And that reason is that every single challenge we face in the world today has its roots in a previous innovation. And this is how it's worked. For the last probably 10,000 years or so of what you might call sort of modern society, there's been a cycle where there's been a problem. That problem might have been, how do you heat food so it's more digestible, more tasty, and safer? The solution is to create fire and start cooking it. So that's the innovation. We are incredibly good at solving problems and we find a solution, but with that solution, there are always consequences. So fire has lots of consequences. Those consequences lead to the next range of problems that we need to innovate our way out of. So for the last 10,000 years of human history, we've had this cycle of seeing a problem, innovating, finding solutions. Those solutions lead to consequences, which lead to the next range of problems that we innovate our way out of, and so on and so forth. And it's actually worked. Life has got better because we've innovated faster than we've created problems. But the challenge is that always going to be the case? Are we always going to be able to innovate our ways out of the problems that technology and innovation creates faster than those problems accrue? And there is no indication that that is going to be the case. We've survived very well so far, but what if artificial intelligence is that one technology where the consequences of the solutions we create using AI are bigger than our ability to solve the problems that arise from them? That, to me, is critical to a technology transition and the AI technology transition, asking if we do things as we've always done them, are the problems going to overwhelm us because we don't have the ability to innovate our way out of them? And if that is even possibly the case, it means we need to rethink how we innovate in a world of incredibly powerful technologies, how we ensure that the solutions don't lead to greater problems than the ones we're solving. And I think with AI, there are some indications that we're heading there. But before I get specifically to look at AI, I do just want to give a couple of reasons why I think this is a particularly challenging issue at this point in human history. So we're now at a point in human history that is utterly unique. We have more people living on this earth than have ever lived before, 8 billion people, and that in itself raises challenges. And remember that we are living in a constrained environment. Okay, we've got into near Earth space, but really most of what we do is constrained to planet Earth. So we are in an enclosed system and we're pushing at the boundaries of that. So we've got 8 billion people now pushing at the boundaries of planet Earth. Those 8 billion people are demanding more from planet Earth than we have ever demanded individually and as a society before. So we are now getting to a point where we're resource constrained. But we've also got a coupling between what we do and the environment we live in. We see this with climate change. Everything we do impacts the Earth we live on. And it's not just climate change, it's the flow of chemicals through the planetary systems. It's looking at biodiversity on Earth. So we're now at this point where if you're an engineer, we've got a non-linear coupling between what we do and where we live. But it gets worse than that. We live in a world where information flows around the world faster than it's ever done before through social media and through digital systems, which means an idea or information or even misinformation can spread around the world and spread through society at the speed of light. That changes the dynamics in incredible ways. So you're beginning to get this sense that we're living in a very, very unstable, nonlinear system. And then you throw in incredibly powerful technologies. You've got artificial intelligence, which is transforming everything we can do. But then you've also got things like biotechnology, which is also changing everything we can do. You've got material science and nanotechnology changing it in the physical world. You put all those together, and it is very, very clear that the forces that are pushing us towards the future are unlike anything we've ever had to deal with before. So that, to me, tells me that we're living at a time when it is entirely possible that the problems we're creating through innovation are going to be greater than our ability to solve them unless we change how we think and do things. Now, you bring that back to artificial intelligence and just think about some of the potential downsides of what we're doing at the moment. And before I say this, I should say there are lots of upsides. There are lots of incredible things you can do with AI. And this is part of the challenge of using AI to solve problems, but also creating other solutions, to solve problems, but also creating other problems. So, for instance, you look at jobs. We already know that AI is replacing jobs and displacing jobs. So the sorts of things that there was a job market for a few years ago, it looks like those are dwindling, even down to coding. The fact that AI is becoming increasingly good at coding means that there are a certain set of skills that are becoming redundant. In my own area, in education, we're seeing AI transforming how we educate, how we create learning environments. And for the first time in my career, I get a little bit worried that maybe we don't need professors anymore because we've got super intelligent computers. We're seeing the possibility of social disparity through AI, where those people that can afford to get access to these systems have got a massive advantage against those that don't. We're looking at social disruption, and I'm speaking now from the US, where we've got an election coming up in a few days' time, and you're beginning to see the impact of AI and misinformation and disinformation on that. You're beginning to see what was already beginning to be a polarized society politically becoming exceptionally polarized, and it's being pushed forward by technologies such as AI. We're also facing the challenge of too much reliance on automated systems. One of the beauties of AI is that you can rely on it to make decisions that you don't necessarily have to. But what happens if those decisions are wrong? What happens if they're flawed? What if they're based on biases within the AI system? What happens, for instance, if you take your supply chain for a whole country and automate it using AI, and the AI does something wrong and the supply chain suddenly stops? Certainly, if you're in the US and you're in a city in the US, typically with current supply chains, you have enough food and water for 2 or 3 days. If the system goes down, after those 2 or 3 days, things begin to get very, very serious. So, what happens if we're building systems we're relying on with AI that break and suddenly leave us stranded? Um, but beyond that, there are bigger questions. And there are questions around how much we actually understand the power we're developing through AI. We are developing in unbelievably powerful systems. And if we don't understand them, if we just blindly trust them, how can we be sure that those systems are truly going to benefit society and our lives? And then, of course, to wrap this sort of list of potential problems up, we have the issue of artificial consciousness. What does happen if we create an artificial intelligence that is self-aware? How does that change society? How does it change the future? How does it change our understanding of ourselves? So this now becomes an existential risk around our own identity and understanding who we are. And we shouldn't take that lightly. So you begin to look at all of this, and this is both why I get incredibly excited about artificial intelligence, because it's something amazing to study and it's something amazing to live through. But at the same time, I do worry about how we're going to ensure that the world in 10 or 20 years' time is the world we want, rather than the world we're left with because we didn't know what we were doing with artificial intelligence. So how do we move forward with this? I think there are a number of things here which are possibilities, but also challenges. So I'll go back to where I started with by saying that if we're looking at advanced technology transitions, especially with artificial intelligence, we cannot assume that the way we've done things in the past will still work in the future. We cannot assume that the economics we rely on are going to work. We cannot assume that the social structures we've relied on are going to work. We cannot assume that everything we've been teaching people about how society works, how policies work, how politics work, are going to continue to work in the future. And if you look at all that, it means we've got to develop new ways of thinking about this intersection between people and technology in the future. We've got to develop new models of how that works so we can develop new processes and mechanisms for ensuring we are able to build a better future. We've got to have new creative ideas here. We've got to identify what sort of skills people need in terms of thriving in this future, in terms of actually getting jobs and being useful in the future. We've got to work out how to actually teach those skills. We've got to develop whole new ways of understanding the world and whole new mindsets. Now, the bad news is that we have so little thought here that we don't know how to do this. The good news is that we actually have a window of opportunity. So I say this to my students, they're one of the first generations that are having to start thinking differently about how they develop the skills necessary to thrive in this future. And they're the first generation that has to think less about what are the pure skills like coding, like engineering, like accountancy that are going to get them a job. And they have to start thinking about the new skills, such as how can they be agile and adaptable in a world where AI can do most things, but there's still a kernel of stuff that only humans can do. and they have the opportunity to think about what are those things that make them uniquely human that they can use to bring value to the world, to their communities, to their employers in the future. Now, what those things are, I think, is part of a bigger discussion. And I'm not going to give you any answers because I don't have any answers. But I think working together, we can begin to work out how to carve that way forward towards a positive AI future. With that, I'm going to wrap up, and I think we should go to questions because I suspect there are going to be far more questions than answers here that it's going to be worthwhile digging into. So thank you so much.
So thank you, Professor Maynard, for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. I think this has gotten all of us thinking that while innovations help us move forward, we should not just blindly follow everything that comes our way. Our actions need to be well thought out and based on a greater understanding. I will now ask Professor Neha. I think she's been able to compile a few questions. I see a lot of comments, questions, sharing of knowledge. Professor Maynard, if you also look at the chat and the Q&A, yeah, people have been sharing what Stephen Hawking said, and what all these people who've been working on AI or have been predicting have said, and they have a couple of questions. I think Professor Neha has been able to compile a few of them, and I think we can go through that. But before she starts, I think one of the questions from the latest happenings, which has happened just about 2 days back, when the Nobel Prize for Physics was declared. So Geoffrey Hinton, who got the Nobel Prize, I was reading what he has written, and he said while AI can be, I mean, he's considered the godfather of AI, but he has also shown his concern on the way AI has been used. And I also saw one of the students also asking this question so you said that when we talk to AI, it looks like we're talking to someone who's at the same level. But I think he also said that, AI systems can surpass human intelligence.
Yeah.
So I think I also saw one of the students asking, what will happen then? Because right now, when we say that somebody at our own level is talking, we are like, it's scary at times. But what will happen if AI, surpasses human intelligence? So I will start with that, and then I'll hand it over to
No, that's a great question, and a really complex one, because it starts off with us having to ask, what do we mean by intelligence? And this is really sort of getting into the weeds here. One of the challenges we found is many of the developers of AI have had a very narrow idea of intelligence. So they've thought of IQ, which is actually not a great indicator of intelligence. And it really just focuses on ability to solve problems and think rationally. And yet, of course, when you look at us as individuals, as humans, intelligence has many, many different meanings. The ways we think, especially if you think differently. So, say, for instance, you're neurodivergent, you tend to think differently and see the world differently, and that's a different form of intelligence. And then, of course, there's social intelligence, there's emotional intelligence, there's political intelligence. And so when people talk about artificial intelligence, they usually think of a very small slice of the ability to solve problems with agency, which means the ability to find a solution to a problem and actually take action on that. Now, if you just look at that and ask, will machines get to the point where they can solve problems with agency better than humans? The answer is almost definitely yes. Simply because we're building machines that have access to way more information than any individual human has access to. They have an ability to see patterns and connections in that in a way that a human couldn't do. And now with these large language models, we have the ability for them to be able to assimilate that and begin to look as if they're human, to emulate that process of being human. Now, the question is, does that extend to other forms of intelligence? Does it extend to other forms of the nature of being human? We don't know that yet. And one of the theories is that you'll only see that once machines reach consciousness. Now, someone like Geoff Hinton is both looking at the power of problem-solving intelligence, but also looking at the possibility that you'll see this emergence of consciousness arising. And that really worries him. Not everybody thinks the same as him, but certainly there are enough people that think that this is an existential risk. But I was also saying, getting back to that question about sort of level intelligence, and this is actually something that might worry some of you. I think it's intriguing. So if you have a machine that's just emulating human intelligence and is incredibly intelligent, it means it has the ability to look as if it has the same level of intelligence as you. So an AI's intelligence may be all the way up here, but when it talks to you, it may feel like it's down here. Now, you can either say that makes it an incredibly smart professor because it's coming down to your level, or it may mean that it's an incredibly good manipulator because it has this intelligence that allows it to manipulate you at this level. And that, I think, raises a lot of questions. So I'm sort of skirting around the question a little bit because I'm not quite sure anybody knows what superintelligence means. But I think there are questions here that we should be asking that we don't have clear answers to.
Sure. Yeah. Neha?
Yes, ma'am, for sure. I think there are answers which are revolving around this may happen or this may not happen. We have got many questions out here. And before that, I would like to introduce to you, Andrew, Professor Avinash Kumar. He is our director. He is head of the institution of Amity Online. And sir is here. Sir, would you like to? Sir, you are not audible. You are on mute.
Thank you, Neha. Professor, thank you very much, Professor Andrews. It was fantastic deliberations on AI. In fact, today the world is around AI, and everybody is talking at any tier that you talk of, any level of the people talking about AI. And what a wonderful, commencements of this information on AI. We all are very convinced. Before I speak a lot, there are many questions where the students are too excited to be answered for. So I would request Professor Neha, in fact, to raise the queries. And there some of the questions are very, very important. In fact, Professor Monica's question was, in fact, very intelligent, and she has asked, and the way you have answered is highly convincing. So without procrastinating this moment, I would request Professor Neha, in fact, to take the questions from the students to be answered by Professor Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Andrew, the first question is, what are some industries or professionals that will see the most radical changes and transformation in their lives due to AI? Which industries do you think are going to get targeted?
Apart from every industry, we're just beginning to see this at the moment. One of the things that has intrigued me more than anything is actually in computing and coding. If you went back 4 or 5 years, students were all being told you need to learn how to code. The future is in coding. You need to understand how to build code because that's where the future jobs are. Now, AI can code pretty well as most students. So now people are beginning to think that the future isn't in coding. You need to learn how to work with AI if you're actually building code and building sort of digital systems. But actually, the AI is getting to the point where it is a better coder than most people. So that has completely transformed things. And I think if you're looking at those systems where you're actually building digital systems, you're going to need a completely different skill set, and there aren't going to be the same coding jobs as there were in the past. It's also going to disrupt a lot of analytical jobs. So if you're looking at jobs like accountancy, at sort of anything where you're sort of working with numbers and information and systems, I think you're going to see impacts there. I've already mentioned teaching, and I think this is one of the really interesting things. So if you go back again a few years, and people have been worried about automation for a long time, but they've always said that automation is the biggest threat towards people that make a living, say, using their hands, or they're sort of fairly low down in the sort of socioeconomic system. If you're looking at people that have got an education and are using their brains for work, people used to say automation won't take those jobs away. So if you're in the C-suite or in management or in production, you're safe. With AI, all of that changes. If you create systems that can behave like super intelligent humans in terms of making decisions, everybody's job is at risk, all the way up to CEOs. And that is why it's so disruptive. And that is why I don't think you can look at this in terms of which jobs are going to go and which jobs are going to come. you need to look at it as in terms of if you want to keep your job, if you want to keep your career, you've got to work out how to adapt so you work with AI. Because if you're not working with AI, at least some people have said you probably won't have a job.
That was exactly my second question, which you have already answered, that how can we save our jobs? How can organizations keep up a pace with AI? So yes, that was actually my second question, which is already
Well,
answered by you.
but if I can add something to that. So this is
Yes,
actually
yes, for
part
sure.
of the conversation at the moment.
Yeah.
There's a serious conversation around if AI ends up being so good that it can do most of the jobs that humans can do, what happens to us? What happens to society? And this is where people have seriously started taking concepts like universal basic income into account. Because if they're saying everybody's got to live, and to be human, you've got to be able to express yourself and sort of follow the pathways and desires that you want. But if you don't have a job that brings you income, you can't do that. So
Yes.
maybe we should have a society where AI is used to create wealth, which is then distributed to people so that they have that basic income so they can actually follow their dreams. And what we've seen over the last few years is that has gone from an idea that people really haven't thought is that serious to an idea that people are taking increasingly seriously. And it completely changes the idea of how society is structured and how you create value as a human.
I think that is going to be very, very complex in a structure that we can rarely imagine at this point of time, that how you will be creating a universal basic income, because there are people who are doing many creative jobs as well. And I think that this is going to be quite a complex thing in future, that how people's job are going to get protected.
Yes.
So do you think that keeping up a pace by learning with how to work with AI would be a better option for individuals at this point in time to
I
keep
think
them updated with the technology?
Yeah, I think at this point in time, actually, you're seeing two things. I think there's still going to be a need for basic human skills, whether
Yes.
that is the skills of working in teams, the skills of really critical thinking, the skills of understanding information and making decisions, the skills around leadership. So there are certainly human skills there. But if you think that those skills are only going to be valuable if you're working with AI, there is also this second layer where I think everybody needs an appreciation of both what they can do with AI and where it's going. Some of that I think you can teach in formal classes. Certainly, my experience with my students, though, is an awful lot of it. You just need to immerse yourself in what's happening and be aware and find resources that can keep you abreast of what's going on that aren't necessarily
Right.
formal classes.
So right, so true that we should make the educational path in such a manner that it would align with the changes that are happening as the AI is developing. So that's
Yes.
absolutely right. So, but there is also a question revolving around it, that is it ethically completely correct that we use AI in current educational system or
Yeah.
in other systems? How can we deal with that question of ethics in AI?
So I have colleagues here who will
Okay.
not use AI in their classes. They say AI is unethical and it's immoral. And they say this for two reasons. They first of all say it because they claim that AI has been trained on material that it shouldn't have been trained on. So AI is effectively plagiarizing the works of academics and intellectuals over centuries. And they think that that is wrong. But then they also claim that our students ought to be learning for themselves and learning to think for themselves. So why include machines? So certainly, and I don't actually agree with those, but certainly there are plenty of people who say that this is unethical. To me, I think that the more important question is how do we ensure that AI tools are developed that are ethical and responsible, and
Right.
how do we use them responsibly? So it's the same with many technologies.
Right.
It's a messy, it's a muddy area, but if we can at least think about what does it mean to develop and use these in responsible ways, and by responsible, I mean ways that actually elevate people and ensure that they don't trample on human rights, they don't actually diminish people, but they allow them to be a better version of themselves. That I think is a very productive way forward. So you look in education. I think that there are profoundly important ways in which AI can positively impact education and learning. And I think it would be very foolish not to take advantage of them. But at the same time, I think we've got to have our moral compass there and not just get enamored with what we can do and forget about why we're doing it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That there is a moral compass going around, and there are many protagonists who are there, and there are many people who are against it completely. In academics,
Yes.
for sure, in research, for sure. I'm doing the research in fintech, and I obviously see many professors telling me not to use any AI tool because you shall not be learning anything. But I feel that I'm learning a lot without
Yes.
even someone there to tell me many complex things. I'm learning a lot. So leveraging
Yes.
that technology into your daily life, into your education, is something we should do very responsibly. Absolutely right.
And if I can just give you an example of that, I had an
That would be great.
undergraduate student who told me
Okay.
this story. He was in a physics class, and
Okay.
I forget what it was. It might have been statistical physics, and he was listening to the lecturer and thinking, I don't understand anything. So he got out
Okay.
ChatGPT and started typing in and saying, I don't understand this, help me. And ChatGPT helped him through that class understand the material. And I think this is an example of how AI can massively improve learning if it's used correctly.
That's right. The teacher will teach. The teacher cannot is not being replaced over here. But if a certain doubt that could come to a student's mind and that can be resolved then and there, that is something we an example exactly of using AI responsibly and increasing your efficiency for sure.
Yes.
So, yes, there is one more question coming up, that how do you see AI affecting the balance between human creativity and machine efficiency in the workplace? So
Yeah.
creativity is, I think, a question to talk about over here.
Yep, no, really important one. And I didn't touch on this in my presentation, but of course, one of the areas that people are very concerned about is creative industries and artists.
Right.
Because now it seems that AI can sort of create everything that humans have been creating. I think that the answer to this is somewhat nuanced. If you take a very simplistic view, you could argue that there's a very real danger of people's jobs going because AI can now produce video, it can produce images, it can do all of this. Now, the question is that art? And this is a huge debate at the moment. And I would argue it isn't art, because art is only art when it has meaning to a human individual. If what AI does is it produces pretty pictures, and the meaning only comes there when there's a human in the loop. So I think that a lot of people are threatened by this, but I'm not sure that they need to be threatened. They need to change their perspective on what creativity means. And this is where I truly believe that if used right, AI can unleash creativity. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. One is where you have incredibly creative people that just don't have the ability to express that creativity. So you take, say, even a 4-year-old child or a 5-year-old child, they've got this incredible world inside their head, an immensely imaginative world, but they don't have the skills to actually express that to other people. AI gives them the ability to take that creativity out of their head and put it into images and videos. And in that way, that partnership between the person and AI is transformative. You can extend that all the way up to very skilled artists and artisans, where because of their human skill, their human ability to understand how to use creativity as a connection between people, they can use AI to enhance their art. The danger, I think, is when we begin to believe that something produced by AI is art, because without the human in the loop, I don't think it is.
So without a, yes.
Sorry, Neha, sorry to interrupt. Professor Maynard, I'll just probably extend this creativity bit to emotional intelligence. Do you think, there's a potential of building in the emotional intelligence part into AI, and what could be the challenges of such kind of development?
Yeah, so I think there is. Certainly, we know we can get AI to emulate artificial intelligence. AI already has the ability to identify different emotions in your voice, to look at your facial images and your body language, and to infer emotion from that, and to reflect that back, to respond in a way which a really sensitive and empathetic human would respond to you. So already we've got the ability to sort of build in that simulation or that emulation of emotional intelligence. I don't think it's real intelligence, but it feels real. So that you can see as a very positive thing, because it means you can actually build an affirmative relationship with an AI. Even if you know it's just a machine, it can actually help you as a person. But, and this is the bit that really worries me, it opens the door to manipulation. And I've written about this, and this is one of the things that scares me most about artificial intelligence. If you have a machine that understands exactly how you work as a human, it understands the role of emotion in determining how you feel and believe and act, it understands all of your cognitive biases, and it can use all of those to manipulate you in a way that you know you're being manipulated, but you just can't help it. You
Right.
effectively fall in love with this machine and you can't resist doing what it asks you to do. And that, I think, is a very real possibility.
Yes, so very strong brains would be required to let them not get manipulated by the machine. So true.
Right.
That we have to be very strong. We should understand when we are being manipulated. Even I think that is required in real life also, right? Not just with AI. But
I think
yes,
so.
it does happen. So, ma'am, would you like to ask any thing over here? Or I should go ahead with one more interesting question over
Go
here.
ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Andrew, there is a student and asking a very good questions that there are researches going on around the corner that human intelligence is decreasing as artificial intelligence is growing. So do you agree with this thing that really people are using their brains less as they're relying on artificial intelligence more?
No, I don't. I think people are using their brains differently. And I may be wrong here. So this is somewhat sort of speculative, and there isn't really research to support it. But then I don't also think that there's research to support a decrease in intelligence. I think what we're seeing is people are beginning to rely on AI and machines to do certain things so that their brains can be used in different ways. And it's not dissimilar to what we've seen over the years with, say, the advent of the printing press. So when people suddenly had access to books, they didn't need to memorize things. And we've seen this time and time again, but it's not a decrease in intelligence. It's a change in how we use our brains and how we actually operate. And one of the reasons why I think that this is the case is you just simply look at this from a biological perspective. All these sort of millennia of evolution have led to the formation of our brain, which is an incredible machine. People talk about this being the only thing in the universe that allows us to understand the universe. It's hard to underline just how impressive the human brain is. But remember, it's evolved to be incredibly efficient. And it would go against all of evolution if somehow our brains started decreasing in their ability to be an incredibly optimized machine for doing things through intelligence. There's no sort of biological mechanism for that. But there are biological mechanisms that say if some of the heavy lifting that our brain has to do can be offloaded onto a technology, it frees up our brains to do different things. Now, what those different things will be, I couldn't tell you, but I don't think it's a decrease in intelligence. It's just a difference in how we actually operate.
That's absolutely right, because I also remember there was a time when computerization was coming in India, and there were many people who were threatened at that time that I might lose my job, I would not be able to teach my children to use mathematical calculations by themselves because computer is doing everything. My child would not be that intelligent in mathematics, and many such apprehensions were there, which are completely ruled out now, and we are working with the computers very efficiently, and we have made the maximum use of technology now. So
Yes.
you rightly said that printing press came and people had some apprehensions in their mind at that time also. So whenever a disruptive technology is coming, then people have apprehensions towards it, right?
Yep.
So
Yep. I know. I think so. And actually, go back to that diagram that I put on with our ability to solve problems. What I think you'll find is because the human brain is optimized for innovation, if there are some things that are being done for us that we don't need to sort of think about, our brains will automatically start working. How can we be creative? How can we be innovative in other areas?
in some other areas, right? So we are just working with our brains a little bit differently, right?
Yep.
So now I have a more of database related question that what are the potential benefits and challenges by integrating AI systems into database in the field of database?
That's a really interesting and specific question.
Right.
So actually, there are a couple of things that I think are interesting. One is I think we're having to change how we think about data, and this has been going on for a while as we've ended up with massive data sets. We've gone from sort of having sort of very structured, localized data sets to what people refer to as data lakes, which are just so massive that you've got to put algorithms into them. But it's all been structured data. What the current batch of AI is showing us is a way of dealing with unstructured data. So now this is doing two things. First of all, it's saying, actually, formal databases don't necessarily have the value that they used to have. So that's one implication. But the other implication is, and second implication is, if you want databases that fuel AI, you've got to use a different architecture of those databases. So that's a shift as well. But then I guess the third aspect of that is when you look at AI as something that both builds and interrogates databases. And there, I'm not sure where that goes, and it's going slightly outside my field. But here's something to think about, which may be way beyond the question. If we give really advanced AIs the ability to collect data and to put it in a form that AIs can use, will they end up creating data resources and databases that are completely inscrutable to humans? So now we have a collection of data that we don't understand, we can't interrogate, only the machines can interrogate it. That raises some really interesting questions.
Okay. All right. So with these many questions, so ma'am, would you like me to continue with the questions over here? Because I can see that there are a whole lot of questions coming from students related to ethics, related to how it will affect the education sector and how it is going to affect the other sectors related to like finance and everything. So there are many questions coming up.
I think we can probably compile a few of the questions which we have not been able to answer because of the time constraints. And Professor Maynard, we would love to share that with you. And if you help, and then we can circulate those questions, because due to lack of time and the kind of questions that are coming up and the amount of information that is being shared, students are really, really excited about knowing about. Yes, the developments are happening. We do see it as something where we can progress with. It can impact our lives positively, but we also see the flip side of it, where it can also have a negative impact, and how we have to navigate through that. I think that from the information that is being shared, I do see that students also have that perspective. So thank you so much for sharing this. I think it has been a pleasure listening to you and listening to all the answers that you have given, Professor Maynard. And I hope we get to hear more from you on this. And we would love to host, and I think our students would also love to hear more from you about where we are progressing and how we would want to progress on this.
Definitely. And it's been a great time for me also to have this conversation with you. I didn't even feel like that I'm asking a question. I felt that we are having a discussion, and things were coming to my mind as well. And there are so many questions that are revolving, because a good discussion always leads to many different questions in different directions. Yes. So thank you so much. It's been a really great time in listening to you. It's been pleasure to our ears, and thanks a lot. And thanks a lot, everyone, students as well, who had been listening and who are asking questions with great enthusiasm. Thank you so much, all the students as well, and the team that has been supporting us today in this session. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure. And of course, if anybody has further questions, you can find me online and on my Substack and just follow up with me.
Sure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you so much.
Bye.